What's going on, guys? It's Infinite Smarticles Gaming, and we are back and ready to slap with another Monster Hunter video. This time, as you can see, Monster Hunter Legends of the Guild. Wow. It's all I've got to say is wow. I mean, talk about a good movie. I absolutely loved it. It was amazing. It was everything that I personally was looking forward to in a movie about my favorite game. Um, Huge redemption. Of course, these weren't made by the same people. Um, there were no similarities, I assume, in the staff or the production or anything of that video. But with the Monster Hunter name attached to it, this was a huge redemption from the first Abomination. Um, of the live action Monster Hunter movie. Um, as a little disclaimer for this video, there will be some spoilers in this, and a personal recommendation of mine would be to go watch the movie before you watch this video, because I wouldn't want to be spoiled from an awesome movie like this. This movie was way too good to be spoiled by some random guy talking about it. Um, But, hey, if you want to watch this to see what it's about and see whether you want to watch it, then sure, I'd be my guest. Um, and another thing is, I'm not going to be spitting out facts here. This is me giving my review, my take, my opinion about the movie. Um, of course, my opinion is going to be a mostly positive review because I absolutely loved it, and anything with the Monster Hunter name attached to it, I probably will love anyway because my love for the franchise in general. Um, but yeah, just wanted to give a disclaimer. So, my overall rating for this movie would have to be a strong 8 out of 10. And I know you guys are like, okay, well, 8 out of 10, but you were just talking about how amazing the movie was. There's a reason I give it an 8 out of 10, and you will learn about it throughout this video. Um, but first, I want to talk about the beginning of the movie and the overall um, movie itself. I was completely and totally wrong. Um, it's really interesting. Um, I was in my trailer review. I'm sure if you watched it, you would know that I was saying that from the trailer, it reminded me a lot of Monster Hunter Freedom and Freedom 2, with the areas that I was seeing and the monsters ish that I was seeing in, not counting the Devil Joe and Kungala, but the majority of the monsters that I was seeing in the trailer kind of reminded me a little bit of the Freedom 1 and 2, but I was totally wrong. I couldn't have been further from wrong when the movie started and and I see the Fifth Fleet. I hear of Zora Magdaros, and I'm sitting there looking at the Monster Hunter World team, and I'm like, "What's going on here, guys?" I was absolutely shook. It was like an earthquake had went off in my head. I was like, "What in the world?" Because that I wasn't expecting. I didn't know what to expect for the start of the video. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't know what to expect, but the Fifth Fleet, Zora Magdaros, Monster Hunter World, the nostalgia that I got, I was not expecting that at all. But I loved it because I had a hunch with a title like Legends of the Guild, you would expect, for the most part, Legends of the Guild to be some type of story being told by somebody, or, a legend, which is, I assume, why they named it that. But I was expecting more of like maybe a retired guild master, or a Wyverian or something, telling a story about a Lunastida that came and destroyed a village, or that was hunted by some legendary hunters or something like that. But of course, that is not what happened. Although it was a story being told by somebody, it was a bit different. And I loved how they went into it. I also love how our friend Aiden, or the excitable A-lister, was used in this, because I'm pretty sure you've seen around the web, the length of the movie. With that, the length of the movie being what it was, and the fact that it was a movie in general, there's no way to fit the true length of a Monster Hunter game into a movie and keep it under 2 hours. I've heard, I don't know the exact hours for Monster Hunter Rise, for example, but I think it's around 30 hours of gameplay if you do it from start to finish and don't do a lot of side quests and other stuff. You just go straight through. It's somewhere around 30 hours of playing, and it's like, nobody's going to sit there and watch a 30-hour movie. There may be some people that watch a 30-hour movie. If it was about Monster Hunter, I probably would, but of course, a 30-hour movie would have to be broken up into multiple days. Because there's only 24 hours in a day anyway. So, there's no way to fit everything that, every monster or every little detail from a Monster Hunter game into one movie. But what I feel is important is to get the main details. And the stars of Monster Hunter are indeed the monsters. At least that's what I think. I don't remember all of the characters that I've created, but I do remember the monsters that I fought. So the fact that they put monsters in there, and they put the monsters in there correctly, keyword on correctly, is a huge thing. And of course, we had Narcilla, we had the Kungala, we had Deviljho, we had Lunastida, we had the Velocidrome. Those were the main ones that we really saw and got were the stars of the show, we can say. But of course, there were other ones that were featured and cameoed in there, like the Slagtoth and the Gargwa. The Bundahabra or the Vespoids, I don't know which one. I didn't look at it well when they were shown in there, when they were running from the Elder Dragon. But it was one of them. Also, the Tetsukabra had a moment in there. I love that. There were a few... I think there were a few others. The Kebi. I saw the Kebi had a moment there when he was getting slung up by the Deviljho before he got devoured. But, of course, you couldn't fit too many more than that in there. And I think that the way they handled it was amazing. Aiden, the excitable A-lister, we know has a tendency to incorporate monster names into his phrases. There was one in the movie where he said it's of course the one in the trailer when he was like, it's time to kick some Lunastra. Super cheesy, right? But I love how they incorporated that, because they were able to at least talk about or mention more monsters than they were able to show. For example, in the movie, he mentions the Zamites as one of his phrases. And of course, they didn't go to an icy region, so there would have been no way for them to incorporate Zamites or Zamtrios into the movie. So them mentioning it, at least, of course we didn't see them, but I felt that them mentioning it was nice, because, they were being acknowledged, I guess. Of course, there was a ton of that in the movie. Of course, we mentioned Zora Magdaros. He was mentioned right at the outset. They mentioned the Zamtrios and the Zamites. They mentioned the Velociprey. They mentioned the Renephilos. They mentioned Alatreon, the Rajong, the Wrathion, and I got to talk about the Wrathion. They mentioned Kushala. Of course, we saw Kushala when they were explaining about the Elders Crossing. They used Kushala as the example, which I thought was lovely. Um, what else? They mentioned the Ludras. Of course, they didn't say which one. And of course, as the Royal Ludrath is my favorite Leviathan of all time, I'm just going to go ahead and assume they were talking about the Royal Ludrath. But you could take that to mean the Purple Ludrath or the Royal Ludrath. But they mentioned a lot of, extra monsters that weren't in the movie, being shown. And so I thought that was really nice to acknowledge other monsters, because the movie was only 56 minutes. So it's not like they could show all these monsters and show them fighting them. So them mentioning them was the next best thing. And I think that filled a little void in me, because it showed that they did their research and they knew monsters, because that's something that was lacking from the live action Monster Hunter movie was monsters. We saw 2 or 3 monsters, but that was about it. And I mean, even in this movie, in terms of fighting monsters, we saw more monsters in this 56-minute movie than we did in that one. And I don't remember how long it was, but if I'm not mistaken, it was pushing 90 minutes. We saw more monsters in this one than we did in that one. So, and then them mentioning more monsters made it feel like there were even more monsters in the movie. So about the Wrathion thing, what shook me even more was the fact that there was no Wrathion in this. I'm sitting there and I was like, I was expecting to at least see a Rathalos or Wrathion cameo because, it's like Rathalos and Wrathion. It's like those are like the babies of Monster Hunter. Like, there's never been a Monster Hunter ever without a Rathalos or Wrathion. I mean, even in the live action Monster Hunter movie, no matter how much people hate it, there was a Rathalos in there. I mean, and Diablos too, of course. The blows, Monoblos, Diablos, one of them is always going to be in a Monster Hunter. That seems to be how it is. A Diablos or Monoblos of some sort in a Monster Hunter. And again, the live action Monster Hunter movie, there was a Diablos. So, I was really shook that there was no Rathalos, specifically Rathalos. I mean, I get Diablos might not have worked, but I was shook that there was no Rathalos. I mean, I was expecting, maybe Rathalos to come down and snatch up a Aptonoth or something like that in the movie, but it didn't happen. And of course, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with the monsters that they chose at all, but colored me surprised still, nonetheless, to not see a Rathalos or Wrathion. But again, of course, they mentioned the Wrathion, so that to me is considered inclusion, even though they didn't show it. She was mentioned. A Wrathion of some sort was mentioned in the movie. So another thing that I loved in the Monster Hunter Legends of the Guild movie was, of course, the armor and the weapons. As I said at the beginning, with the movie being so short, there was no way to actually get all of everything about a Monster Hunter game into one movie and keep it under 2 hours. But the important things they did put in there, one of those things being the monsters, the other things being the armor and the weapons. I love the armor and I love the weapons from the characters. I thought that was absolutely amazing. Of course, the one that stood out to me the most was Aiden's Velociraptor sword and shield. I thought that was amazing. Of course, I love Julius's dual blades. Those looked very cool. But of course, Aiden's Velociraptor sword and shield looked absolutely amazing too. Of course, we all know you would never go up against a Lunastra with a Velocidrome sword and shield. That is a very dumb idea. Aiden learned it the hard way when the Lunastra ate his shield. But, it's still, the weapon design was cool. Of course, in my trailer review, if you go see it, I was thinking that they might show a progression of weapons between the monsters that they fought. They didn't, and that was totally okay because, again, they still got the weapons accurate. They got the weapons right. Of course, me being a greatsword user, those of you that have watched my other videos would know that greatsword is number one for me always. I was disappointed there was no greatsword. I was a little bitter, but even still, the weapons that they chose looked amazing. They were accurate, they were correct, and they were what you would expect. The insect glaive, loved it. The kinsect that went along with the insect glaive, wonderful. The iron ore switch axe used by our smithy was amazing as well. It looked good. Everything looked good, and everything functioned how you would expect. I love how they showed the actual switch between axe mode and sword mode on the switch axe. I thought that was amazing. And of course, the armor looked amazing. Of course, I talked about Julius's armor in the trailer video. And I've never used a female character, so I don't know what armor May was using, but you guys can let me know in the comments. But I know that's based off of a monster that was in a Monster Hunter game. I know that. But as for which one, I don't know. But they all looked amazing. They all looked like they would come from Monster Hunter. And I thought that was, that was great, because you would expect in a Monster Hunter game to get weapons, to get armor from the monsters that you have slapped, and to use them to slap even harder monsters. Of course, we saw our smithy with Devil Joe armor that we're going to assume he got from the Devil Joe that they killed in the movie. Yeah, that makes sense, And they used the Devil Joe's dragon element abilities to enhance the Dragonator that they used when they were fighting the Lunastida. So, again, this concept of slapping monster, using materials from monster to make better materials, to slap bigger monsters, to do the same thing over and over again, is what I do in Monster Hunter. Like, currently in Rise, I'm trying to get every single weapon and every single armor piece, to make different mix sets and whatnot. But that's what Monster Hunter is to me. Slap monster, get weapon to slap bigger monster. And I feel like they achieved that in the game, of course, or in the movie. Of course, they weren't able to show huge progression because of the length of the movie, but again, there was the idea that was there, and the people that made this movie did their research, to know that, hey, we need to put that in there because that's an important part of the game. And of course, that made me smile a lot. I enjoyed seeing that. That was another wonderful thing that I loved about this movie. Another thing that I probably should have mentioned with the monsters was the monster environment. Well, not the monster environment, but the environment that they were in. Now, one of the issues that was easily noted in the live-action Monster Hunter movie was the fact that they spent most of the movie in the desert, and there's nothing wrong with that. There was nothing wrong with spending most of the movie in the desert, because, of course, we know the Black Diablos was on the cover of the movie. Made sense. But then, at the end, I feel like the directors of the movie were like, oh, crap. We've got all these areas that we should have covered, or at least featured or mentioned some kind of way, and we didn't. So now it's time to do this little 2-minute slideshow of all the different areas that we should have put in the movie or should have mentioned in the movie that we didn't. And if you saw the movie, and if you didn't, that is totally fine. But at the end of the movie, they went from an oasis forest type thing, And then they pan through a volcano and they pan through another forest. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. You're sitting there and you're like, I know good and well y'all didn't just go through a volcano without a problem. Not in the world of Monster Hunter. You at least would have saw an Agnactar or a Gravios or a Basarios. You would have saw Brachydios, something. There would have been some sizable challenges in that volcano that you would have come across. You wouldn't have just skipped on through there like nothing was going on. Like, ooh, we're busy. Sorry, Brachydios. We're going to have to fight you later. It's like, no, that's not how it works. And, the forest region, it's like, Rathalos, Wrathion, you were going to come across some monsters. And I feel like they rushed that. In Monster Hunter Legends of the Guild, however, they didn't do that. They realized, or, they planned ahead of time, hey, this movie's going to be this length. There's going to be no way we can incorporate a volcanic region, 2 foresty regions, a cold region. We're not going to be able to put them. They didn't even try, okay? And that I enjoyed that a lot better. And another thing was the monsters that they decided to put in there fit with the environment that they had. Of course, there were changes in the environment, but it wasn't all just the exact same spot the entire movie. But the environments made sense together, and they worked. For example, at the very beginning, when Aiden was fighting the Velocidrome, running from the Velocidrome, that area really reminded me of the forest and hills from the Monster Hunter Freedoms. Specifically, that cliff off to the side, if you remember, or if you've seen it, if you know what I'm talking about, the cliff off to the side in the movie when the Velocidrome kind of falls over the side, it kind of reminds me of areas 3 and 4 in the forest and hills. That little cliffy area. But that made sense. It was a forest because it's in the name of the area, forest and hills. Of course, that's not exactly what they used, but that's what it reminded me of. Then you fast forward in the movie to when they were fighting the Kungalala and the Devil Joe, albeit they were on kind of the edge, I feel, of maybe a deserty, drier region and the forest. They were still close by the forest. So you were still there at the forest because the Devil Joe, as he was, eating a snack, the Kebi, he came from the forest. So did the Kungalala. They both came from the forest because why? Of course, Devil Joe roams anywhere he wants to. He does whatever he wants. But the Kungalala is more of a forest creature. So the fact that those two monsters were there made sense. Again, the same thing with the Velocidrome. And the area made sense because we had been in a forest for the entire movie. The village was in a foresty region. Had they went and put a Zamtrios in there and, went to a frosty area, it wouldn't have really made sense because, again, it's not like we're in Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate. We got a flying ship that can take us where we want to really fast. They were walking where they needed to get. So the areas that they used and the monsters that they put in those areas were perfect. The Narcilla made sense in a forest. The Kebis, they made sense. The Tetsukabra, he made sense. All of the monsters that we were shown in the movie made sense. And again, when they mentioned the monsters that weren't in the movie, they might not have necessarily fit in those areas. Of course, Wrathion would have fit. The Rajong, he can go anywhere too. He doesn't really care. The Zenogre would have fit in a foresty region. But, I'm thinking, Ludrath would have preferred water. So there wasn't really any water around. The dam was there, yeah. And maybe the monster that ate that fish at the beginning was a Lutherath. Who knows? But, some of the monsters that they mentioned, like Elatrion, wouldn't really expect him to be in a forest. So, and the fact that Lunastera was in the forest, but of course it was explained through the Elder's Crossing. It was the reason she was there. Because typically you wouldn't expect to see Lunastera in the forest either. But, like I said, the monsters that they chose made sense, and the environment went very well with the movie. They didn't try to rush through it at the end and we've got to make this journey to get to the Lunastera type thing. No. There wasn't any of that. They kept it consistent. The monsters fit in the environment, and it made it a lot more pleasing to watch, and it didn't feel like they were rushing anything with the environment and the monsters in the movie. So, the last thing that I wanted to talk about was the reason why I gave it an 8 out of 10 and not a 10 out of 10. To me, this might be, to you guys, it might be super petty, super silly. But for me, it was a slight, just a little bit irritating, just a teeny tiny bit. Not anything that was oh my God, it's off. Just a little bit was, and I've talked about it throughout, the length of the movie. Of course, you couldn't have made it too much longer because then it would have been way too long. But I feel like maybe adding 20 minutes to the movie would have helped me a little bit. Because the problem I had with it was, for me, I wasn't able to bond as well with the characters as I would have wanted to in a movie, especially for the critical tear-jerking moments that should have happened in the movie. For me, the progression, it happened fast, it happened quick, fast-paced, that's great. Nothing wrong with that, but I would have loved for it to have taken a little more time. Just a little bit, though, not too much, because, there isn't, with the live-action Monster Hunter, that drug on way too long. But for me, the moments like when our Smithy dies or when May dies, I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, because, we met the Smithy after we fought the Narcilla, after this scene right here that the picture's on, actually. The one of the guys that they helped free from Narcilla's webbing was headed to the Smithy anyway. So we met the Smithy. He refused to help them make weapons and armor. He fussed at Aiden. He fussed at Julian, and he talked about you being a hunter previously, but that was all we really got from it. And right before we fought the Lunastera, Julian and the Smithy talked again, and they delved a little bit more into it, but I didn't feel like I connected with him enough to the point where I would be emotionally moved when he got burned to a crisp. Why did he quit becoming a hunter? What motivated him to become a hunter in the first place? Was there something that happened during his time as a hunter that led him to abandon his squad, leave the guild, and go on to becoming a blacksmith? Did he regret it? There was nothing there that what were his mental struggles during that time period? It was being a hunter something he always wanted to do? There was none of that. And so I didn't really feel bonded with him. To be honest, he was a more upfront, assertive personality anyway. But, when he got burned, he was helping them hold the Lunastera down so they could shoot her with the Dragonator. But it was like, okay, you died, but I'm sorry, I just don't feel anything for that. I wasn't able to bond. And the same thing with May. Though I feel with May we were able to get a little bit more from it, I don't think it was enough. We did learn that her parents were botanists of some sort, because she mentioned how she was always researching, flash bugs and mushrooms and all that stuff. It still wasn't enough for me. She mentioned wanting to leave, but I wanted to know a little bit more, about her upbringing, the village she was from, where was it, you know, why did she want to leave so bad? Dive into that a bit more for me, so that when she does get eaten by the Lunastida, I can actually, feel, because the only death that I actually felt bad for was Beasley, May's kinsect. I just about lost it when he fell over. I was so sad. But I didn't feel that way for the other characters because I wasn't able to bond with them as well. Of course, we already knew Aiden from Monster Hunter World. World did a good job of describing his character and his personality. Of course, it was lovely to learn a bit more about his background. But I just feel that the other characters we weren't able to bond more with. We had already heard about Aiden's hometown getting overrun by monsters and his parents dying. But, more would have been appreciated. What they used was fine. I'm not saying it was bad at all. What they used was absolutely fine. But for me, I would have loved a little bit more. The only way I could be okay with this, of course I am okay with it, what am I saying? But, if they were to make this into a series, Monster Hunter Legends of the Guild, and have it a series, and have a series of different stories with different monster encounters and different characters, then it would make sense that, hey, we can't fit all the mushy personal information into 56 minutes because we've got this series going of different events with different characters in different settings. That would make sense because then that would be kind of like the flow that they're going with, and it would make more sense. But if this is indeed a one-time movie, then, for me, I just would have loved to have just a tad bit more information about the characters, specifically the ones that died, to make it more of a tear-jerking moment, more of an emotional, like, oh my God, they died, that's my opinion. I would love for this to be a series. Absolutely love for this to be a series. I would love more Legends from the Guild. I'll just tell you now. If I could write a letter to the Guild and say, can I have more Legends, please? I want more stories. I would, because I love this. And I do feel like this could be a series. I don't know what other people are saying about it. I tried to stay away from all the comments and reviews about this before I did my own. But for me, I would love to see more Legends of the Guild. I would. I don't care who they're from. Freaking village chief from Kokoto or something could tell us legends about, a giant Gammoth or something. I don't even care. But, the movie itself was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful. My little small opinion does not discredit the absolute joy of watching this movie. I love seeing the Malinks in there. Nox, he was an absolute hoot. But if I could, and maybe they will, I'm hoping all of you watch and support this so that maybe they'll get an idea that, hey, we can make this into a series and people will watch it, because I would. We already know series for Monster Hunter can be very good with the Monster Hunter Stories, spin-off anime that they did. I love that as well. But, that's me, and that's what I think. A series would be lovely for this, but this on its own was perfect. Um, that's all. I didn't get to mention anything about the monster attacks. I forgot about that, but the monster attacks were super perfect and everything I expected. The reason I love the Kungal a lot is his ability to fart. Clouds of colorful gas on you that have different effects. And I loved how they showed that paralysis in there as well. And the mounting, they showed that. They showed the pitfall trap. Different elements of Monster Hunter that you would use to hunt a monster with. So I love that, yeah. But that's my review of this movie. This has went on way too long. But I wanted to get everything out, and I wanted to tell, what I really thought. And maybe you found this useful, maybe you enjoyed it. But if you enjoyed this and you want to see more of my channel, consider subscribing. Comment and tell me what you thought about the movie, because I'd love to have a discussion more about the movie. I loved it. But yeah, that's all I got. My channel is mostly about gameplay. For those who don't know, I'm currently finishing up Monster Hunter Stories 2 gameplay, and I'll be uploading the rest of those over the next few weeks. And I will get back to doing Monster Hunter Rise gameplay and showing you guys my collection so far of the swords that I have, and showing you guys how I get the other swords. I'll try to figure out how I'll do that. But, consider subscribing, because I do not plan on going anywhere anytime soon. And hopefully I can get to the point where I can upload even more frequently. But that's all for me, and we'll see you guys on the next video.